Hello and welcome to the Madecast, the official podcast of the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment, a series of lectures on video game history as part of the Made's ongoing effort to preserve history through teaching and displaying playable exhibits of rare games and consoles.
While life in the time of COVID has forced us to close our doors, the support of people like you has allowed us to continue to bring history to you through lectures like the ones you'll hear in a few minutes. I'm Red.
I'm Miles.
I'm Chun.
And I'm Anthony.
Today, Alex gets to talk with Elan Lee, mastermind behind the alternate reality game genre, as well as designer of Exploding Kittens and numerous other tabletop games. I gotta say, this interview that we had was really remarkable to sit in on. His philosophy behind games and their relationship with the people playing them is really, really magical and touching, and I really believe everyone will enjoy hearing what he has to say and his approach to making games and bringing joy to the world.
Yes, this is a must listen.
First, let's get into some news, though. So, surprising me, but probably not many other people, Resident Evil is getting its own Netflix show, keeping in the trend of popular games becoming animes or CG shows. We've already got a trailer and a release date, and it's coming out July 8th.
Wow. I feel like something of this stature would have been announced sooner and a lot more hype built behind it, but because we've been hearing about the League of Legends one for a minute. We've been hearing about, the Dota one came out and had a bit more like press leading up to it beforehand. This is going to be interesting. I want to see how this story will unfold. I have high hopes for it. I think it'll be very nice.
One thing I can be sure is it probably won't go as the one in the future because we all know it's...
Hey, that was a fun movie. If you discount the relation to the video game, it's a fun movie.
But it's just called like Resident Evil. That's the problem. You bear the name, you hold the title. I believe you have the responsibility to do something about it instead of just making something. That's my point to anything, any game or even animation that turns into a movie, especially a real life one.
I'm really excited about it because the horror genre, it relies on a lot of the jump scare kind of thing, but also just really eerie environments. I mean, most of these horror games took ideas from horror movies and older classics like that. So I think taking a story that was inspired by older movies or horror movies of that type, I think bringing it back to screen may also lend itself well to that type of story. I mean, fingers crossed. I mean, I can't, I've been let down too many times that I can't actually have too high hopes for any sort of game show or movie.
The record is too bad.
As far as other news, Divinity Original Sin 2 is coming to iPad.
Yeah. So if you haven't played Divinity Original Sin 2, definitely check it out. It's not for everyone. It's very slow and methodical, but it's an extremely deep, really interesting world, really fun story. Like, there's just so much content to enjoy in it. And just it being on more systems and being accessible to more people is great.
What didn't you say that we talked about Baldur's Gate a while back, Baldur's Gate 3, and you said Divinity Original Sin 2 kind of was of a similar type of style of game? Yeah.
So the people who are making Baldur's Gate 3 is Larian Studios, and that's the same people who made Divinity. And I think Divinity Original Sin 2 is why they got to make Baldur's Gate 3, because they have just an incredibly good track record on this kind of thing now.
Did they say it has to be an iPad Pro or just any iPad will do?
It does need iPad Pros.
Do you need? Oh, it does need iPad Pro?
Yes.
The last little bit of news that we have to bring about, Nintendo Switch Online has crossed 100 retro titles, including some really deep cuts. You want to name off some of those deep cuts?
We got Caveman Ninja, Joe and Mac. We've got Magical Drop 2. We've got Super Baseball Simulator 1000. We've got Spanky's Quest, and we've got Ninja Jaja Maru-kun.
Spanky's Quest. Spanky's Quest.
Spanky's Quest.
Spanky's Quest, everybody.
From 1991.
Yeah, if you haven't played it, I highly recommend.
They're doing a pretty good job in archiving old games, I think.
They have done a really good job.
I think what Nintendo is doing with the Retro Store is fantastic because it's it's bringing sort of new life to these extremely old little hidden gems.
Game preservation.
Yes, exactly. It's genius. I wish more companies would do that. Xbox is also kind of doing that by porting old 360 games. I wish they would port more original Xbox games. Same with PlayStation. I really wish they would do a lot more with early PlayStation and PlayStation 2 games, but we will see. We'll see how they go in the future.
Yeah, they would probably rather do a remake or remaster of it rather than just archive the old one. That's what they like to do for PlayStation.
Yep. I think it's time we throw it on over to Alex and Elan. This is a great interview. Please enjoy.
And we are back with Elan Lee. Elan, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I suppose we should introduce you in some way or other to our audience here, because I'm not sure everybody knows you are the person or one of the people responsible for the Exploding Kittens game.
Indeed, yes.
But I would love to credit you with sort of the godfather of the alternate reality game. Would you take that title?
I will take the credit of being on a team with a bunch of other very smart people, and together we brought those things into the world.
Indeed. How would you explain I love bees to people today in this day and age when no payphones exist?
Yeah, I know, right? Okay, so I love bees. The easiest way I can explain it is Microsoft came to our little team and said, we're launching this game called Halo 2, and we want it to be the biggest marketing thing ever. And our response was, Halo 1 was the biggest marketing thing ever. Everyone's looking forward to Halo 2. It's going to be even bigger. You don't need our help. It's going to, you problem solved. You have no issues here. And they said, no, we want this to be a cultural phenomenon. And that really piqued my interest because what a fun challenge. And I realized that the story of Halo 2 is about aliens invading the Earth and that experience from Earth's point of view. And I thought, okay, aliens invading the Earth, cultural phenomenon, that's actually been done before. That's Orson Welles. That's War of the Worlds. And he wrote and published this incredible radio drama, put it on the radio, and like a ton of people, I keep wanting to say like all of the United States tuned into that thing, but it wasn't actually the case. It was actually a small, moderate number of people. It just got repeated over and over again until everyone on the planet knew about it. But he convinced all these people that aliens were actually invading the Earth. It became a cultural phenomenon because of that hoax, and that story's been done, and to great success. And so why don't we just copy from the best? So we wrote, recorded, directed a 6-hour radio drama told from the point of view of people on the ground as aliens were invading the Earth, all in the story of Halo 2. And then instead of publishing it over the radio, like our predecessor, we decided to publish it over payphones. Tens of thousands of ringing payphones all over the world. Walking down the street, a payphone starts ringing, you pick it up, and there's a voice saying, oh, thank God you answered. Whatever you do, don't hang up. Listen, I need your help. You're the only one who can help me. Whatever you do, don't hang up. And then she launches into a story. And each payphone held about 2 minutes of audio content, and they all fit together like a giant global jigsaw puzzle. And the players themselves were responsible for tracking down those payphones, collecting the audio, and then reassembling it in order to unlock the entire 6-hour drama that was told over the course of several months.
So how far and afield did these payphones ring?
Well, getting a payphone to ring, it turns out, is no small task. We had to, we eventually got payphones all over the world. We targeted major cities all over the United States, all over Europe. We literally eventually got phones to ring everywhere on the planet. And I actually, when I was working with my writing partner, Sean Stewart, to come up with this idea, we thought that part would be easy. We thought, oh, there's got to be an internet directory of payphones. And we did a simple Google search and found one and thought, well, here we go. So all we really have to do is record these numbers, put them into a machine that can do essentially an auto dialer, and problem solved. But what we found in trying those out was most of them were dead, Some of them didn't accept incoming calls. Some of them had literally been ripped off the wall. We were in this constant struggle to find working payphones, working against the clock, not only for our own deadlines, but because every day more and more payphones go extinct. And this was back in, what was it, like 2001, 2003, somewhere in there.
2004, 2005.
Thank you. 2004, 2005. And payphones were already on their way out. So what we did, we literally hired an army of interns. And we said, here is a GPS device. Here is a cell phone. Here is just an armful of plane tickets. And your job is to go to these places. As soon as you get off the plane, look around for payphones. And as soon as you find one, go up to it, write down the phone number, try calling it, make sure it takes incoming calls, look at your GPS device, record the GPS coordinates, and then move on to the next one. When you've done about 10 phones, go back to the airport, cash in your next ticket, move on to the next city, and repeat. And that's how we got our own personal database of tens of thousands of payphones.
That's just a remarkable story. Talk about like doing it the hard way back then. Now you just go to like and you get a bunch of people to do it in some distributed work thing like TaskRabbit, but you basically invented TaskRabbit.
Yeah, for a very, very focused task.
Right. So, okay, alternate reality games. You did a few after that, and we could do a whole show on I Love Bees, and maybe we should in the future, but I want to get through your career here, right? Like, what about graveyard poker?
Oh, yeah, Tombstone Poker. Yeah.
Tombstone Poker.
Tombstone Poker was a marketing piece that we did for a game called Gun. It was by Activision. It was a Western, and one of the goals of that game, so we put up this website that told a story. It was a very similar story to the story of Gun, so kind of introducing players to the world. But one of the things that this website did was every week it advanced by about 25 years. So the website aged 25 years once a week. And by doing that, we got to not only tell the story, but we got to tell a multi-generational story. And the interface changed, the voices changed. You're suddenly listening to the great-granddaughter of the protagonist, and then the great-great-granddaughter, and then the great-great-great-grandson, et cetera, et cetera. And every time you would tune in, a little bit more of the story would unfold in front of you. But part of what we were doing there was telling the story of the dead. And because we spent so much time focusing on these different generations, we wanted to tell a little bit of that story out in the real world. And we thought the perfect place to do so would be in graveyards all around the country. And telling a story in graveyards, especially with actors and players, is a very tricky thing because obviously you have to be so respectful. You have to make sure not to disturb anyone. Part of our mantras was we have to make sure we leave these places in better condition than when we found them. We can't interrupt anyone. But we do want, after working with a lot of the directors of these sites and the caretakers of these plots of land, we realized that they actually did want people to come there. And they actually asked us, they said, how can you invite people in? How can you show them that these are beautiful places filled with history? And there's a celebration to be had here about the stories of these incredible people who are buried here. So we wrote a game. And the basic game, because our website focused on poker, we figured out a version of poker that you could play at graveyards. And we built a translation system to convert any tomb into a card. So we deal out physical cards. Here's 3 cards that everyone has to use as part of your hand. And now you got to go find your other 2 cards to complete the best hand of poker. And the way you do that is you find any 2 tombs. We realized that there's only 4 kinds of tombstones in the world. There are those that are flat on top, those that are pointed on top, those that are round on top, and those that have statues on top. That's it. Look at any tomb. It's one of those 4. Well, there's 4 suits of cards, so we just did a 1-to-1 translation, right? Flat is diamond, curve is clubs, etc. And we said the only rule is pick any 2 cards you want to complete the best poker hand, but you and your partner have to be able to touch both of those graves and each other at the same time. And that does something remarkable. That gets players out there enjoying the place, looking at graves, lying down on the ground, this crazy taboo thing. but taking pictures, having fun, sharing these stories with their families. And the other rule was, of course, you have to leave this place in better shape than you found it. And so we basically built, on top of building this really wonderful story engine told through graveyards, we also built an advertising campaign for the individual cemeteries with the permission of the people who ran them. And it was kind of a win-win for everybody. The players had a great time, we had a great time, our client had a great time, and the cemeteries themselves were really appreciative of the attention and the cleanliness of their grounds by the time we left.
So this is sort of what I wanted to highlight for our listeners, is that I feel like your skill is being able to make a game out of anything and tell a story through it, which is like a double-decker of crazy skills to begin with, right? Like a game out of payphones, a game out of graveyards. I mean, you made a game out of toast in a pickup truck. So I'm wondering, how do you see yourself? Is it the stories first? Is it the games first? How do you even come at these things?
I actually don't think of it as either of those. I really think about any endeavor from the audience perspective. From the audience's perspective, it has to satisfy one criteria, which is when I participate in this thing, I must become a more extraordinary version of myself. And that's not role-playing, right? I don't hold them to this very high bar of you need to dress up, you need to believe all this stuff, you need to, buy into our story. What you have to do is believe that you are an amazing person, amazing things can happen to you, and we're just going to hold that door open a little bit and hope that you walk through it. And if we can hit that criteria, amazing story, amazing experiences, amazing collaborations, and amazing community rolls right out of that every time.
I'll tell you, there was an experience I had that I was so sure you had created, and I found out it wasn't you. Were you familiar with the Jejune Institute?
Yeah, of course. I'm friends with the people who run it. Yeah.
I tried to write a story about them for like Wired, for all these other places. Everybody poo-pooed me and told me to run off. But boy, that's an amazing experience. Have you ever wanted to make something along those lines? Or maybe more experiential? Because now you're doing board games and card games, right?
Now I'm 100% devoted to tabletop games, which if you look at what we're doing now is honestly the same thing. It's really trying to show people that the world can be a little bit more extraordinary than you previously thought. I'll tell you my favorite example, the sort of epitome of our company. So we make this game called Exploding Kittens. And one of the things we have to do as a company is show up to these game conventions, or at least pre-pandemic we had to. Hopefully we'll have to again. But that's really the lifeblood of a card game company, of any tabletop game company. So you have to show up to these things. And the problem with these things, if you've ever been to like Comic-Con or any of the larger conventions, is they are noisy and really hard to stand out. And your typical experience with a booth is you walk up to a booth, you give them some money, you get your game, and you walk away. And you have no memory of that experience or what happened there. And so I looked at that and thought, well, we got to do better than that. And really taking to heart that notion of how do we make this extraordinary? How do we make it so that when you walk away, you have a story to tell, you have an experience that you want to share, and you believe that you are now a slightly more extraordinary version of yourself. So what we did was we looked at the typical booth that exists in those places, and we realized that the transaction is essentially equivalent of interacting with a vending machine, right? Walk up, pay money, get thing, walk away. And we thought, well, what if we built the world's most amazing vending machine? So we did. We built this 12-foot-tall, fur-covered cat. I mean, it literally was. It looked exactly like a cat. And it had a big screen on it and a bunch of buttons, and you'd walk up to it, push the button of the game you wanted, put in your money, and the game would come out. But there was also another button on there, a button called Random Item, $1. And this was your invitation into the extraordinary, because when you put in $1, the objects that would come out of this machine were as random as you could possibly imagine. They were maybe a paper airplane, or a pineapple, or a balloon animal, or a toy action figure. Maybe the machine could figure out who you were. We saw someone, for example, like cosplaying as Mother of Dragons from Game of Thrones. And the random item that came out for her was a dragon egg, a full bedazzled watermelon dragon egg. Stormtroopers come out, lightsabers fall out of the machine. Like it it is an impossible machine. It makes no sense. It can't possibly function. Just to cut to the punchline, the way it works is it wasn't a vending machine at all. It was a vending machine costume. There were 8 of us stuffed inside of there for 10 hours a day, crafting random objects based on who walks up to the machine and what buttons they push. And back there, we were able to produce somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 different objects based on what materials we ran out of at any given moment. But
Good Lord.
Right. But the experience was exactly the promise, which is you walk away with an extraordinary story. You walk away knowing that there is magic in the world and it's because of you. The end result is instead of walking away from a booth with no memory of what your experience was, now we have 200 people in front of our booth sitting there watching for hours, because you're never going to see the same object come out of there twice. And the lines snaked past our booth, down the hallway, outside the convention center and down the street, not to get into the convention, to get to our booth. And that, unfortunately, eventually led to the fire marshal shutting us down, because we are definitely a fire hazard at that point. But it was, every time we've run it like 6 times. The lines to walk up to the booth are 2 hours long, but that doesn't even matter, because what really matters is the space in front of the booth where people are hanging out, telling stories, telling, oh man, you would not believe what you just missed. This guy walked up and this extraordinary thing happened. This little kid walked up and pushed the button and they unrolled 14 rolls of toilet paper on him, and now he's walking around the convention as a mummy, right? Like stories like that were every 5 minutes, because our premise was you will become an extraordinary version of yourself.
That's amazing. I really just to maybe tip the hand, but I would love to sit down for an hour and come up with an ARG we could do for the museum for our fundraising efforts later on. But in the meantime, what are you working on now? What games are going on?
We have so many fun tabletop games. The one I'm most excited about right now is a brand new game that we just released called Poetry for Neanderthals. And this game is rapidly becoming our best-selling game. It's the simplest premise ever. The basic idea, the way you play the game is you divide up into 2 teams, and when it's your turn, your goal, you draw a card, and there's a word on the card, and your goal is just to get your team to say the word on the card. And you can say anything you want, except for, of course, the word on the card, and you can only speak in single-syllable words, which immediately you become a Neanderthal. You are a caveman. You have no choice. When you try to restrict yourself to single-syllable words, you just start speaking like a caveman. And it's hilarious and silly and ridiculous. And I've, played this game with my grandmother, who is just as good as my, 20-year-old sister. And it's really this incredible notion where instead of trying to make an entertaining game, this game makes the people you're playing with entertaining. And that is the most delightful thing for me ever, because if ever you're going to start a company and you have that as your goal, your success is going to be a very, very positive thing for yourself and for the world.
So in the light of the being a better version of yourself, how much better does it make you to throw a burrito at somebody?
So that game, Throw Burrito, is our only game that is outselling Exploding Kittens. We have 2 of the top 3 games in the world right now, and Burrito just passed Exploding Kittens, which is crazy to me. Throw Burrito is a really fast-paced game. It's there's a bunch of cards flying around the table. You got 5 in your hand, and you're just trying to get 3 of a kind, just any 3 cards that match. Every time you get 3 of a kind, you get a point. But every time you get 3 of a kind, you also get to pick up a squishy foam burrito from the middle of the table and huck it at somebody. They don't hurt much when you get hit, but every time you do get hit, you lose a point. So gaining cards gains you gaining 3 of a kind gains you points. Getting hit by a burrito loses points, and it is impossible to figure out where to focus, because you're staring at the cards, trying frantically to collect them. You're also ducking and dodging and hiding behind other players, trying not to get hit by these airborne burritos. Mix that all together, and you've got a game that is certainly the most insane, intense thing we've ever created.
I mean, that also goes along with whacking people with the stick. You failed to mention the inflatable club in Neanderthals.
Oh, Neanderthals, right. If you ever do speak a word that's more than one syllable, we include this giant inflatable caveman club, which we call the no stick, single syllables, and you get to bonk them on the head to indicate that was more than one syllable.
Now, how do the crab claws work?
The crab claws. You pick the wackiest stuff we produce.
Well,
the
yeah.
crab claws. So we have this other game. We've been around for 6 years, so we've got a good dozen games out there now. The crab claws is from a game called You've Got Crabs, and You've Got Crabs is all about sending secret messages to your team. So you're collecting, again, you're just trying to match up certain cards, but when you do, you are not allowed to tell anybody that you just matched those cards. Instead, you need to send a secret signal to your partner, and they have to say, aha, you've got crabs. If they're right, you get a point. If you're wrong, you lose a point. And so the thing is, you're constantly looking around the table trying to figure out who's sending me messages. Is the other team sending signals? Maybe I ought to accuse them because then I can steal points from them. The game is fun and ridiculous, but we also released an expansion called the Crab Claw expansion, and it includes a wild card. It literally, the whole box, single card, it's a wild card. A wild card in this game is so overpowered. Like, if you have a wild card, you are definitely going to get a pair, right? It makes it so simple. But if you have the wild card, you also have to put on these 2 giant rubber crab claws that come with the game. And when you're wearing these crab claws, everything in your life becomes more difficult. It's harder to hold the cards. It's harder to pass the cards. It's harder to draw cards. It's harder to send your signals. It's harder to accuse people. Everything goes to hell when you're wearing these crab claws, much to the delight of everybody else at the table.
That is just the soul. I love how your game design is like nothing is off limits, right? Like, let's screw with people's ability to hold cards in a card game. So
it's insane that people pay me to do this job.
Oh, well, I'm so glad they do. And Elan Lee, thank you for taking the time today to be with us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Elan, for that marvelous interview. It was a pleasure to have you on, and we really hope that we can have you back on in the future. We know times are busy, and we also hope maybe we can do something in the future. It was a marvelous interview. Thank you for coming on.
Those games they have made actually sounds pretty fun. I mean, throwing a burritos to your friend,
it sounds incredible. Also, what they did at the game conventions, I thought that was really genuine and awesome. I wish I could have been there. I wish I could have paid $1.
Yeah, brilliant.
But in the meantime, have any of you, did any of you hear about I Love Bees back in the day, or were you into that level of Halo?
I had no idea.
I was too young back then for that.
I guess I'm too young either for that.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't aware necessarily of that much. I knew Halo 2 had a lot of like big buzz around that specifically, but to actually hear about,
I know Bungie like to hide things like that in that kind of way, which is awesome. But
yeah,
if you talk about the more recently one, I might have a track on it, but the old one, I'm just too young for that.
It's sort of reminiscent of The Matrix, the whole like phone booth.
Oh yeah,
the call.
Yeah,
it got me, brought me flashbacks of that, and seeing that it's like the early 2000s.
Matrix is still highly relevant, and just seeing everything about that. Oh man, it just sounds so cool, and also the tomb. Yeah, I love how whimsical it is.
No, I thought the Tombstone Poker was probably the coolest thing he showed off.
Yeah,
it's making a game out of the real world. I mean, obviously that's the point of alternate reality games, but like the way he integrated an actual physical location into a card game essentially was really good.
Yeah. It's really cool. Just the way his thought process of like even just trying to get more people in to kind of believe in magic, but even and behind that, like there can be magic in the world if you're just like look in your eyes and take it in. There's somebody who cares and is putting thought behind it to make people have this experience. And I think that's something that we can all kind of like take a step back and look at all these, every game that we love, everything that makes us enjoyable and experience to play. Somebody was behind that experience and they wanted to bring fun and enjoyment to you to enjoy during that game. And I think that is something that we can all kind of appreciate. I think that's about almost time to wrap it up. You want to just round off list style what games we've been playing?
Oh, I'm still slogging through Hollow Knight. I've gotten to the end game where everything's way too hard.
Good, very good.
I have been participating in the digital fan festival of Final Fantasy XIV. There's a bunch of story on it, but it would be spending so many time talking about it. So I decided
I haven't heard of this game. We'll have to save it for another episode to talk more about this. I've never heard of the Final Fantasy.
Yeah, I'm still on Tomb Raider. Yeah, nothing too exciting there.
I'm still on Final Fantasy 15, chugging through, getting a little high level. Before we send off, thank you for listening to the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment's official podcast. If you've got any thoughts, questions, corrections, or general museum ideas, shoot us an email at info@themade.org.
We would like to send out a big thank you to everyone who donated recently and to our Patreon supporters who keep the Made afloat. Patreon donors get to listen to this podcast 1 week before it's released on major streaming servers, and we'll continue that with future episodes every week. Till then, I'm Chun.
I'm Red.
I'm Anthony.
And I'm Miles. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.